spoke to our hearts for sure. Let's get right on into it today. 1 Peter chapter number 5. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 5. We'll read this morning. There's a likely chance we will complete the sermon today. There's probably some thoughts I'm just going to give to you, but I'd like to move on to another subject here. Perhaps after this, we'll see how it goes through the sermon, chapter 5 of 1 Peter, verse 5. Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you, be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility, for God resisteth the proud, and giveth grace unto the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. These verses are very important because I think they give us as modern-day believers and modern-day Christians an idea of just what it is that God would have us to do to find success in a world that is very difficult to live in. I think he gives us advice on how to live in a world and thrive in a world that is seemingly in opposition towards us as believers. He tells us what we are to do and how we are to live, and the idea that sometimes even we ourselves, I think, get in our way of spiritual success or spiritual growth. Because as we go through this world, we often have issues with the idea of clothing ourselves in humility and finding that God is trying to maneuver us or move us in certain ways. And I like to say oftentimes, but lots of times those ways are not ways that we would choose for ourselves, or ways that we want to go for ourselves. And so what he is saying to us is, in times of need in your life, he says what you need to do is allow me to take control, allow me to lead you and guide you in the way in which you should go. The prime example of that is found in this little illustration that happened to us this week. I came home from work, I think it might have been Wednesday or Thursday, and it had been a long day. It had been strenuous. We were working and doing a lot of physical hard labor. And I guess it was Monday, I guess it was Tuesday, because I needed, I don't know what day it was. It was some day. It's been a long week. This time change has really messed me up this week. This has been unusual. I usually don't have too much trouble, but whatever day it was, I guess it's not important to the story, but whatever day it was, I came home and I was in two different work trucks that I had. One is bigger, and I just usually use that to tow around my equipment, and I was trying to put it back in the barn, and I said, I can't. I was already out, and I said, I just don't feel like driving out there. I'll do it in the morning. In the morning, it was a lot less limited time, a lot more limited time of trying to get everything completed. And I was already out, and I said, Oliver, get in the truck. I don't know if I knew this guy. I said, Oliver, get in the truck, and I said, drive it out there. Richard already went into the house, and so Oliver gets in the truck. He's a little hesitant. I haven't let him drive the truck in a while, and he's a little hesitant. Jasper jumps in the back, and I'm like, oh no, I hope Richard doesn't come out. And so I step up on the running board, and I said, let's go out to the barn. And so immediately, Oliver drives all the time, his mowers, and he's driven just lots of things, lots of times, so he's pretty efficient and staying on the road, on the driveway, whatever. And so I didn't think much of it, and so I'm standing there, and I got one hand on the not the hood, the top of the truck there, and I'm holding on in the door, and I can see on his face he looks a little nervous. And I said, "What is the problem? Just drive out there like you drive 1,000 times. You burn 100,000 gallons of gas driving your mower. It's exactly the same." He said, how did you put it? You can't hurt anybody if you run through with a mower. You don't tear anything up. And I said, well, don't hit anything. That's a simple fix. Don't hit anything. And so I'm standing there, and we start to go, and it's going fine. And at the end, you're driving out, and I haul a bunch of gravel on you, and have a big turnaround, but you can turn the truck and the trailer around so you don't have to back in from the road. And I said, just swing the truck around, get it lined up, and we'll back it into the barn. And you would have asked him, I thought, to design a rocket to go to the moon, from what I was asking. The look on his face and what, right? Don't sit there act like that. No. He is like, what do you want me to do? I said, steer the truck towards the other barn. I have a telephone pole, a barn here, a brick block building here, another barn here, my trailer's here, a fence is there, I got a concrete bucket there. I mean, there's a lot to get around, but it's literally 50, 60 feet wide there at the back. And so he starts going, and I say, turn the steering wheel. And he's, inching it over. So I grab the steering wheel. I'm hanging on, I grab the steering wheel, and immediately he just tenses up. What are you doing? And so I steered it up, and I said, now turn it. We're headed towards the barn, and finally we get towards the trailer, and I said, I can bring this truck and a 30-foot trailer in here, and I can turn it around, you back in this truck up. And he puts it in reverse, starts to go. I'm saying, turn the wheel. I'm giving great, simple instruction, no issue with my instructions at all. And he finally gets to turn around, and I said, put the thing in park. I'm getting off, and I said, pack it in the barn. And his face, I said, just get out of the truck, and I'll do it myself. All in good fun. Well, I wouldn't be mad at him or anything, just all in good fun. And I said, what's the problem? You drive all the time. He has a little trailer, can back it. If you ever back the trailer, it's opposite of it. He can back a trailer better than I can. I said, what's the problem? I said, you drive all the time. He said, I don't have a dad standing up there yelling at me every instruction. And Jasper's like, yeah, Oliver, that's right. And I said, I wasn't yelling anything. I was telling you all that you were doing. I said, but you just weren't doing it right. I said, I wasn't yelling any instruction. And Jasper, he's on my side, on my team for everything. Yeah, Oliver, he just agreed with Oliver until I said something. Now he's agreeing with me. Yeah, Oliver, I guess he really wasn't yelling at anything. I said, of course I wasn't yelling at anything. But it's like this, that we know, right, we think we know how to do it, and we're living our life, and then we have somebody sort of standing over us telling us you need to go this way. And even though we really know we need to do that, it's like the idea is somebody watching over every aspect of my life sort of brings some nerves and some unsettledness and uneasiness. And God says, what I'm trying to do is simply get you to go. Isn't it amazing how I got to play God in that story? Isn't it you go this way and do that? And it's like, even though sometimes we know that's what we should do, we don't always perform it to the best of our abilities. We don't always do it right. And sometimes it's because we feel that sort of sense of incompetence, or maybe I'm not doing it right, and maybe if I do it wrong and he's watching, he'll say something to me, he'll impress upon me. And God said, the greatest lesson I want you to learn about this is I'm trying to steer you for your own good, because I care for you. That's the ultimate lesson that's trying to be taught here, as Peter's trying to tell the church. He said, ultimately what God is trying to show you is He wants to direct your life in such a way that at the end that you feel confident and cared for enough that you'll give Him all your trouble and all your worry. And He said, that's what I'm trying to convey to you. That's the message I want you to understand and I want you to do. And sometimes the truth of I guess, knowing what God has in store for us and coming to that conclusion naturally in and of ourselves, it doesn't always line up and mesh as it should. And God says, what I want you to do, the younger ones, the ones who are new to this, the ones who are maybe new to Christianity or younger in the Christianity, He said, look to the ones who are more experienced, and they will help to guide you in this. But He says, to the ones who are more experienced, He said, don't think you have all the answers. Don't think you know it all. He tells us that you should clothe yourself with humility. And then He gives us this this promise. He says, because I will resist you who think you have all the answers, who think you know all the ways to go. I will resist the proud, but I will give grace unto the humble. And that's sort of where we ended last week. We talked about how does God show his care for us. The first week we talked about just the awesomeness or the bigness of God, that he's the one who actually cares for us, the one who created and made and spoke and holds together. That is the same God that is saying this to us, that I care for you. And then last week we talked about there is promises that, you know, when you think about the broadness of our influence, it's really relegated to just a couple hundred people that would even be affected by us or know that we even exist, and then dwindle down further and further and further to the few who would really be affected by our not being here. And God said, I would. I mean, to me, that is so amazing. God said, I would be affected if you weren't there, because I truly do care for you. And I'm going to show you that care. First, he says, through my purpose. My purpose is I'm the one who predestinated. I'm the one who spoke. I'm the one who did. I made you on purpose. And the purposes that I have in your life are on purpose. And he said, I want you to show you that. And he said, because my ways are superior and my purposes are successful. What I've purposed in my heart, I brought it to pass. How does God show us he cares for us? By what he's purposed. And then his promises, as we talked about and focused heavily on last week, were the idea that he will give grace to the humble, but will resist the proud. And he resists the proud in this way. He will arrange things against us. It's like, you know, you start to move. I watched a funny video the other day, and it was people that were running and jumping hurdles. And if anybody's good at that, I think that's a great skill, you know, just running and be able to jump. But apparently, I never thought much of it, but apparently the hurdles it's very important that you place them certain distance apart. And what happened, the video showed, is they had like a set of 6, or however many the standard set is. They had, I think it looked like 6. They came and they jumped the first 3, and then the person who set the hurdles up actually put the hurdle next set too far apart. And so here's like 4 or 5 races, and they're running, and they're jump, you know, they're successful. And then all of a sudden one guy takes 2 strides and tries to jump again, but there's no hurdle there. And it's pretty funny looking. And then he comes to it, and then he tries to jump over, and he falls, and like 4 out of the 5 guys fall down. And they said, look how funny this is. The hurdle's in the wrong spot. And somebody is so trained that I jump, take 2 steps, jump, take, you know, do it, that the little movement of those things disrupted everything that they knew. Their brain said, it's time for you to jump again. And he stretches out and tries to jump, and then tries to jump again and falls over. You know, he gets up, and he's there's no sound in the video, which is probably a good thing. You know, he's waving his arms, and he's throwing things. You know, the other guy fell down, and is, you know, kind of laughing about it. But you see that somebody that is going to resist you is going to arrange things that are going to kind of disrupt us. It's like that the man that set the hurdles was resisting the runners because he arranged it in a way that was detrimental towards them. That's what I'll do. And we can't even really fathom that about God, that God would arrange things against us. But he said, absolutely I will, because I will resist those who come to me with a proud and an arrogant heart and an arrogant life and an arrogant faith. He said, I want to give grace to you, but he said, I won't if you don't come to me the right way. And the reason we must come to God the right way is because he said, ultimately, I'm trying to do something for your good. And he said, if you're not going to approach it this way, you will not see this as for your good, and you, I guess, in turn, will miss the greatest blessing that God is trying to give. And so he says, I will arrange things against you. I will resist the proud. What is proud? It's simply someone who has overestimated their own abilities. The context is speaking of a person who refuses to do and to yield themselves to what God is doing in their lives. They take a stand against him, causes him to take up an arms against the proud person. He must resist them. I think if you ever wanted to come to God and be what God would have us to be. We have to give, God has to give us the grace that we need to learn to yield to Him. Yielding to God is a process. Yielding to God is something that takes time to learn how to do effectively and efficiently, because our human understanding of how God works is so flawed. Because sometimes when we yield ourselves to God and it doesn't work the way we already planned it to work, then it's, what do we do now? That's why God tells us there in Proverbs, lean not on your own understanding. Because your understanding of how something should turn out is not always how it will turn out. And so you have to lean on Him. He says, what I want to do is, I want to give you something in return for your humility. He says there in verse 6, humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, and He will exalt you in due time. This is a promise. God says, let me show you how much I care for you. I show you through my promises, but He said, I promise that I will exalt you. I will give you what is needed for you. Another benefit that accrues from submitting yourselves to God is exaltation. God will exalt you in due time. And we think, well, exaltment, He must have put us in our place, put us a prominent, give us leadership and respect. And sometimes, yes, I think it can come to that point, or maybe, it's sometimes God allows us to be in the spotlight at times. But I don't necessarily think that's all it's talking about, because when you read the verses in the context of what's going on, He's talking about first being a sheep, and then a shepherd, and then the chief shepherd, and then humbling yourselves, and God exalting you and then He goes right into that I'm going to cast your care because I'm going to care for you. Now, and I guess in viewing of what is being spoken about, sometimes when we go through the very difficult days of life, we're down and we're low, we're abased, and we feel like we're never going to have another good day. We're never going to excel again in life. And God said, you stay humble to me and I will exalt you. I will lift you up. I will raise you up to a place that you didn't think was a possibility in your life. It's the carrying the idea that you have fallen, but just because you have fallen doesn't mean you can't finish. If you're racing, just because you're knocked down in a fighting match doesn't mean you can't get back up. He said, I will exalt you in due time. The promise is those who live in humility will have exaltation, will be exalted by God. I think sometimes it's a part of understanding that in life there are valleys and difficulties, and those are the times that we're down and we think while we're going through them that this is the end all of our life. There will never be another sun shining day. And God says there will be. I will exalt you in due time, to lift you up, to elevate, to raise higher. It happened to so many people in the Bible. It happened to so many people throughout history who thought that they were never going to be lifted again. And with Joseph, while he was in prison, he interpreted the dreams of the butler and the baker, and you know what he asked him? He said, all I ask of you for repayment, he said, is to remember me and speak this to the Pharaoh. That's all I ask. You know what they said? Sure, yes, absolutely we will. We'll definitely do that. And they went out and totally forgot him. And you think, wow, that's so, how could God allow that to happen? How could God allow that to be such a thing as that? And, if Joseph had gotten out of jail and prison right then, I don't think anything would have ever came of him being the one to interpret the dreams. But God said, I have a plan for you. It's like, you need to steer wide here. But He said, as I'm standing here looking, you say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And God says, then allow me to do it. Don't resist. Don't hold back me directing you. Joseph, you're in prison. You're going to have to stay in prison a little longer. And I don't want to do that. That's not right. It's not fair. My understanding tells me that I have helped and I should be helped. And God says, not yet. He says, I will exalt you. And eventually, of course, he gets out and then truly is exalted. He's given only second to Pharaoh himself. If he had not gotten out, Israel would not have been saved, and his brothers would not have came. And the story of the Israelite nation is drastically different. But God exalted him in due time. He brought him up out of a low place. I think that's what God is saying. So he reveals his care through his purposes and his promises, and lastly, his provisions. Look at verse 5. Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. God has given us a plan. He has provided a plan for us. The first two verses here in this text, again in verse number 6, he gives us a command, humble yourselves, therefore, excuse me, on the mighty hand of God. I think what he's really trying to get across to us is these first two verses of our text reveal that God has a plan for us. But for what? His plan for us is ultimately, he says, I want you to live a happy and a stress-free life. Now, I could ask us today, whose life is stress-free? And I think no one here would say, that's definitely me. I don't have any stresses. I don't have any pressures. I don't have any worries, anxieties. I don't have any cares. I live a happy life. And I think as parents, we look down to our children or at our children and say, why are you so desirous to grow up? You grow up, you think means freedom, but it really means worry and anxiety and stress and angst on certain things. And I was talking, my brother helped me one day this week, I was talking to him, and I don't know, we got on the subject, we talk about it a lot, we got on it again, about things that we worry about, things that we were stressed over. And he was telling me something that Reed had said. He said, Dad, you go from one thing, you worry about it, it works out, it doesn't work out. And he said, the next day you're on to something else. And he said, I know, son. He said, why do you do that? Why don't you just not worry about things? He said, you'll see one day why I do or don't. And I told him, I said, yeah, I was telling Rachel just a couple of weeks ago, I've told her before, but only a couple of weeks ago, I said the problem with this business that I try to do, as it said, you sit and worry because there's too much, and how am I ever going to get all of it done? And I'm going to lose this job, someone's going to be upset, and I'm never get it all done. And so when you get it all done, then you sit and worry, it's like I don't have anything to do. There's so much worry of how are we going to make it this month, how are we going to survive this, because there's nothing to do. And I said, it's like you come out to days like today when, winter is finally over, and I look at her and say, man, we made it another winter. And if you don't work outside, if you have a normal job like that, winters aren't anything. It's just the winter months. But winter to someone that is outside or does primarily work that's dependent upon the weather, winters are very tough. They're very lean. They're very, man, how are we ever going to get through it? If we just make it through. And so you try to branch out into other aspects and other avenues, and you think, man, if I could just conquer this, and then I can't go get another job because I need to do this in the nice days, so I just get hired part-time somewhere or something. But it's always a stress and always a worry on how to do it. And God says, my design is that you wouldn't live that way. I said, well, how am I supposed to accomplish that? God doesn't make any sense. He said, well, to do the effect, if you are new to this idea of Christianity, he says, go to someone more experienced. Go to someone that is older, and I know wiser is good, but wiser, more aged and experienced in this, and see what they do. And so he says, I want you to submit yourselves unto them. That is, you line up under them. You are in line with what they're saying and teaching and doing. He said, that's the idea of what I would have for you to do. You're new to this idea of being faithful when faithfulness is hard to accomplish. Being faithful when it seems like it's not working or it's crashing or crumbling down. You find faith in those times. And I think it's very important. He says, so, I've often, as long as I've been here at this place, we have always had I don't exactly know, not an elder, we've always had an aged congregation that is considerably in years and experience in life. And so I try to look at that and say, how did we make it to this point? And as you grow as a Christian, you pick out people in your life and say, man, they have survived and went through struggles and went through hardships. And I came in here, goodness, I think I was 25 when I took the church, and probably that time, the median age of the church was probably 60 or above. And he'd listen to a 25-year-old talk about stresses and pressures of life. And I remember Sis told me, honey, you have no idea. I don't know how many times she told me that when I would talk, honey, you have no idea, but I'm sure going to pray for you. All the things that you would say and do. And it's like, you just don't understand, Josh. I know your word is stressed about that, and you think it's the end of the world, but God has a way, and God is good, and God will provide, and God will give you strength. And to me, it helped me immensely as a very young man everything was a crisis, I still kind of live that way. No, I don't. I'm very calm and mellow now. But, everything is a crisis, and everything has to be addressed. And just to watch the unwavering ships of those who are more mature than me, and it's like, okay, now I can see that God is able to provide even when we think that no provision can be found. But the trouble is, when you have people like that you talk to, they don't let you get away with too much. I'm 41, but wait till you get 60, my back hurts, but wait till you get my age, this hurts, wait till you get, they don't let you have anything. And he says, look, submit yourselves unto them. That's what I'm asking you to do. And, our children have been raised in a church where there are very few other young people. To me, that is a disadvantage sometimes, but it's also a great advantage. That they can see a level of faith that it's just simply not going to be demonstrated or lived out in someone who hasn't lived life. We look at them and say, this is the kind of faith that we hope you come to. A faith that is reassuring. He says, what I'm telling you is submit yourselves, line up under the authority of those that are older than you. And he says to the elders, though, he says, I want you to be very humble. I want you to teach humility to them. And I think what is the reason that is necessary is because sometimes when you have people all constantly looking for you for advice or wisdom or teaching there, sometimes we begin to think, maybe I do have some of the answers, maybe I do know what's going on, and maybe I can have it. And he says, but wait, he says to you that are elder, he said, still remain humble. And I know Brother Larry, I think he's been watching. Somebody's really been watching the last couple of weeks, but I always, I've always looked to him as long as I've known him, which really hasn't been a long amount of time in my life. I've always looked at him as somebody that, is just a rock of the faith. And then you go ask him something, and you see sometimes he says, well, why would you come to me with this? Or he doesn't understand the significance or the importance that he brings and the stability that he brings to the people around him in faith. And I think it's the idea that why would you look at me for that? Why would you look at me? Well, there's how old, 80 and this 82, 83, 80. Larry is 42 years older. That's why. More than I've been alive. You've doubled my. That's why I'm going to look to you for advice or a spirit of understanding in those things. And that's what the Bible tells us to do. But sometimes, we think, and especially, maybe not in other cultures, but especially in our culture, it's like, what is that person going to teach me? As you get younger, and somewhere along the line, you start to have, say, reverence, but you start to understand the significance and importance of people that are older than you. But in our culture, it's like, well, you don't contribute to society. You don't know anything about TikTok or Snapchat. What are you going to do? You're not anything really to us. What can you teach us? And there's so many things, right? There's so many things that we can learn. And amazingly, God knew that. And he tells us there in the Bible, he says, line up under people that are more seasoned and aged than you. And he said, and learn from them. Because I'm about to ask you to do something that is going to be incredibly difficult. But he said, I need to care for you through this plan. This plan that was laid out is very important. He said, younger to the elder, elder ultimately to God. And he said, this is the way I would have you to go. You humble yourselves. You bring yourselves low under the hand of God. That is when it hurts. That is when it doesn't add up, when it doesn't make sense. That is when the pressure is on. Any other time in our life, he says, bring yourself low to the seeking of what God would have. And what we can say is when we submit ourselves to the promises that God has given, we oftentimes can find success. Consider who yielded their experience to God. It was one I speak of so often is the widow of Zarephath. And that story has just always been so telling, because here comes this preacher who has not, listen now, this is what's so hard to understand. He has not been hungry. He has not been thirsty. He has not suffered loss, because the Bible said that the raven came and brought him the food. So he's constantly, even in the time of famine and drought, he's constantly had the water by Cherith there and had the food from the meat from God. And so finally the brook dries up and he makes his way to Zarephath. And here first person he probably runs into is this widow lady, and he says, let's go to your house. And she says, okay, but she says, I only have a little meal, a little oil. And she said, I hate to break it to you, but we're not. This is it for us. This is all the little cake that we have, meal that we have, oil that we have, and we have nothing left. And so much that she didn't say we're going to eat it and scrounge around. Hopefully in a couple, she said, we're going to eat it and die. So imagine, just think for a second what they look like. They must have been just bones. Probably had pot belly from malnutrition. There was nothing left. It wasn't like they could go down to this place and get it, because there was a famine in the land. There was nothing there. And she said, this is a little bit that we have left. And he's just, in very recent day, ate meat and bread from the king's table, some say. And so he comes down there. He's not known starvation. He's not known hunger like this. And so they break him. She makes the bread, and he says, well, give it to me. Let me eat first. What a testament of faith that the woman gave it to him. And you would say, well, you would look at it and say, I was just testing your faith. Here, eat it, and then watch what God will do. But the Bible didn't even say that. The Bible said he took it and he ate it, and it was all gone. There was nothing left, no crumbs spilled. Can you imagine the horror that she must have felt? How could he do that? This is a man of God. This is someone that God had sent. And he has just taken the very last thing that we ever had. But she humbled himself under the hand of God. And, it doesn't say too much about it, except he then reveals her to go look again. And you would think, what was the point? Why go look again? If she, I'm sure, had measured it out the last several weeks, knowing that this was going to be it, there was no point to look again. Everything was gone. It was all gone. Everything. And she goes and looks again, and it's there. I wonder how many times she had to look at it to make sure that, am I seeing things? Am I delirious? Is this real? Is this even happening? It was there. And she made it, and they did eat. And I don't know how many times they ate, maybe twice a day. And she went back, and it was there again. And she ate, and her son ate, and then even Elijah ate, because he was staying with them, and there's enough for all three of them. And they all eat. And God began to exalt her. Right? He began to lift her up. But that, as I taught some of him, that's not even the point of the story. The point of the story is not the meal and the oil. That's a precursor to what God was going to do, because the precursor, because of what God did, was so much more devastating than what she thought he was going to do. Because now they had sustained, they had found food, and the Bible says, lo and behold, her son gets sick and her son dies. He dies there when Elijah is there. He dies after all the meal and oil had already been provided. And you know what she said? She said, how did you bring this evil upon us? She had humbled herself under Elijah, and then the worst, beyond what she even thought could happen, happened. And she said, you have brought a curse upon us. Why did you even come here? Why did you even do this? We wanted to eat it and die. We wanted to know that this was it. And everything is ruined now. Everything is terrible. And Elijah looks at her son and takes him up there and begins to pray over him. And you imagine his prayer. He said, God, this is not what we thought was going to happen. What does God say? Now, Elijah was the elder here. She submitted himself unto Elijah, and Elijah then had to submit himself unto God. He said, I don't understand what's happening. She did everything that you said. She didn't hold anything back. She gave everything that she could give, and yet the result is the same. Her son has still died. He laid over and put his body over and began to pray, and, imagine nothing really is taking place. He gets up and he looks out and he prays again. He gets up and looks out. All of a sudden he sees a little cloud out there. I think it's a story. And he said, looks like a man's hand. And he goes and prays again. And all of a sudden he puts his head down probably to the chest of that boy or however old he was. And he hears something that wasn't there before. He hears a heartbeat. And God said, let me show you what I'll do. I will exalt you in due time. Let me show you what I'll do. He says, you stay humble unto me and under the mighty hand of God. He said, that boy is gone. That boy is dying. But he said, it's nothing for the voice of God. It's nothing for the power of God. He said, it's nothing for someone who am I going to give grace to. He said, you could have easily show pride and arrogance in your heart and said, just trust God that God's going to do it. But he said, you humbled yourself before me and you began to pray. And he said, I will answer that kind of prayer. And he said, I will reveal myself to you. Now, does it always happen that way? No, it doesn't. That's why he said, lean not on your own understanding. Don't try to tell me I have to do that every time. I don't. But he said, I want to do it. He said, because I wanted to show you that I could do it. He brings the boy back down in his arms. He must have been small enough for him to carry. He brings him back down in his arms. And the woman is ecstatic over what she sees. And then her faith has grown exponentially. You say, how much more faith could she have? God provided the meal and the oil, the meal and the oil, the meal and the oil. And then when tragedy struck, she lost all that faith. When God did something that was supernatural, something that was beyond even her comprehension and understanding, all of a sudden her faith was there to stay. Because he said, what I'm going to ask you to do in verse 7 is going to be very difficult. It's going to be very challenging. It's going to be very trying. He said, that's why I have told you in verse 5 and verse 6, he said, I have persuaded you that you humble yourselves under the hand of God. You allow me to do a work that only I can do. And he said, the answer to your life is found right here. He says, cast all your care upon him. Because God can exalt you. He has exalted grace because God has a plan. But God also has provided a place in his provision. He said, I've given you a plan to follow, but he said, I've given you a place where you can take your burdens. He said, it's so wonderful to have a plan to know that God can provide. But he said, often on that journey of the provision of God, he said, you'll be so overloaded, so overwhelmed, that you can never find the time, never find the strength to do it. But God said, I've also provided a place that you can cast all those burdens, all those cares, all that anxiety, all that worry, all that trepidation, all that fear. He said, you can cast it upon me because I care for you. I'm saying today what kind of faith that we need. We need a faith that can cast care. Because casting care is more than just saying, well, I'm going to give it to God. It's you take it off you and you throw it on him. It's you take it, you lift it off and you leave it there. You give it to God and you have the faith to say that I know God can and will, if he so chooses, to provide in this way. God is able to do exceedingly abundant above all we ask or think. God who is able can do that. He provided a place to throw something on someone else. He provided a place to throw upon. He's provided a place to give. We say, well, this is so great that God has given us here. It's just the Lord that said that. Jesus has said that. But in Psalm 55:22, The Bible says this, David speaking, he said, cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. He shall never suffer the righteous to be moved. This is not something, a New Testament attribute of God. This is God's personality. He said, I want your care. I want your trouble. I want your worry. I want your anxiety. I want your fear. I want that which is holding you from doing all that I've called you to do. Give it to me. How do I do that? He said, you got to learn that. You got to learn that. And the world doesn't understand because they think, oh, you just come in and you just say, oh, I give it to God, I give it to God. And he said, you're so delusional and you're so crazy that you believe something like that. That's until you've actually done it. Because the Bible talks about when you do something like that from God, He can give you a peace that surpasses all our understanding and all our comprehension and all of what we know about things. God said, I can deliver you. I can do it. But you got to give me those cares. You got to cast them upon me. He says there in Hebrews, for you have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities. He said, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, that your request be made known unto God. He said, I will never leave thee. I will never forsake thee. He said, I am able to do exceeding abundant. He said, I will provide. David came running at Goliath, having not been able to wear Saul's armor, nor take Saul's sword. What was he going to do? Let me ask you, what was he going to do when he faced Goliath? But do you know before he ran through that valley and up that little hill to where Goliath was, you know what he passed over? He passed over a little brook. I think it was in the valley of Elah. And in that little brook, you know what he found? He found 5 smooth stones. He found that which no one else would have understood. No one else would have looked down and thought anything of. They would have just ran over that. And if he had been carrying Saul's sword, he would have ran right over and not been able to wield the sword as efficiently as he could throw those 5 smooth stones. But God said, I have a plan. And I have a purpose. And I have a provision. He said, long before Goliath and the Philistines ever came to this valley, long before Saul and the Israelites ever came to this valley, and long before Jesse had ever sent David to check on the status of his brother to see about the war, God said, I already placed 5 smooth stones right there. Not jagged, that could not have accuracy. Not jagged, that would have not been effective. He said, I placed 5 smooth stones that could not be covered in silt, not be covered in water, not be covered in the dust of the valley. He said, but it could be seen and easily seen and picked up, because he said, one day a young man's going to run through here facing the greatest challenge of his life, and he's going to need some stones. And so he said, I'm going to allow these stones to be there. Can you imagine when God spoke into existence this world, that he already had an idea of 5 smooth stones and where they needed to be? That's the kind of God we serve. That's the kind of God, he said, humble yourselves under the very mighty hand of God. He said, because I know where the stones need to be. I know where they need to be. Now this valley wasn't like a corridor. This was an open valley. And he said, I know the path that this young man is going to run. And I know the brook that he's going to cross. And I know the sword and the helmet and the shield are not going to fit. Well, I'm not going to let him face the battle alone. I'm not going to let him face the battle without the stones. He said, I'm going to provide. Here's a young man that already cast his care upon God. He said, I've already fought the bear and I've already fought the lion. And surely God will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. God's going to provide. Take my sword. No, I can't wear it. My shield. No, it's too heavy. My armor. It's too big. What are you going to take? Well, I got this sling. There's no stones here that are adequate. There's no stones here. What are you going to do? He said, I'm going towards him. God will provide. You're provided for him that which is needed. Because in conclusion, God cares for you. He is interested in you. He's interested in what you do, what you say, where you go. He's interested in the worry and the anxiety and the fear that we carry. He says, you who are new to this, submit yourselves unto someone who is more aged. And you who are aged, he said in our teaching, he said, submit yourselves unto God. He said, be clothed with humility under the mighty hand of God, and I will provide. I will exalt you in due time. I will give you what is needed and necessary to succeed. But I want you to do something. Will you cast your care upon me? Will you take those burdens that I don't want you to carry? Will you give them to me and let me bear them for you? Why would you do that, God? Well, I care for you. I care for you. I care for you. That's why. I'll take your burden. And I'll provide you a place to cast them. That place is me. Where are you at, God? I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere. When you're there in the darkness of my heart, I'm there. You're there in the valley, you're there on the mountain, you're there in the ocean, you're there in the wave of depression, I'm there. That's the place. Where's the place to cast your care on him, and where is he? I'm everywhere. When are you going to be there? I'm always there. I'm always there, all the time. Anywhere you need me to be. Because I have the mighty hand. You can either align yourself with me, and I'll give you grace. He said, or you can buck at me, and I will arrange things against you. But I won't arrange them against you to hurt you. I arrange them against you because I need you to line up with me, because I need you to do something, and that's to cast those cares. Don't carry them. Don't carry a lifetime of cares when you can give them to me at any time, any place, because I'm always there. That's the grace that God wants to give, the mercy that he has in store for us. Some of us are carrying burdens we have no business carrying. Bring them to the Lord. Cast them on him. He is the answer that we need. Let's pray. Father, now thank you for this passage. Thank you for these verses. Thank you for what they mean to us and for us. Thank you how they can provide a nugget of hope and a nugget of relief for us at times. Father, I pray sometimes we have the faith of David to run towards the battle not having the answer in hand, because we already know you'll provide. Sometimes we're like the widow of Zarephath, that we have the answer in hand, but we don't know you'll provide, but we still do the right thing. Sometimes we can be like Saul, who was told to wait for the preacher to come, and when he was a little bit late, he decided to take matters into his own hands, and that's what lost him the kingdom. Became very proud, thinking he didn't need to submit himself to you, Father, and you just stole it away from him. But I pray we're on the right side of your grace. We're under the hand of God. We're submitting ourselves one to another and ultimately to you. Father, I pray you help us to conclude the sermon, conclude our life as the conclusion of the sermon. We finally find a place to cast those cares. And that place is on you. Let us don't bear these burdens alone. And once we take them off, let us truly leave them with you. Father, you'll bless. I pray you watch over us. Help us to be all that we should be for you. Give strength and mercy where needed, Father. Give guidance and hope. We ask now these things in Jesus' name for a second.